But officials from these power leagues are drafting a document that essentially will prevent schools from abiding by their own state laws. I can't even explain what they're trying to do, but I'll just ask you the question: do they have lawyers?
Yeah, they have lawyers. Look, I don't happen to think this is a particularly good idea. It's just a draft, so there's nothing been signed or agreed to yet. So I don't know exactly what their thought process is in trying. Obviously, I think over the years you've heard different administrators and even coaches complain about how can we have fair competition when there are differing state laws. I find that to be somewhat of a specious argument because there are differing state laws with regard to labor, tax, you name it. I mean,
right.
you don't see coaches saying, "Hey, it's unfair that Florida and Nevada and Texas don't have state income tax, therefore they can get better coaches and better employees than we can. So we have to have a national standard with regard to taxation so that everything's fair." I mean, that's an absurd notion. And state laws differ on all kinds of things that matter to competition. But what's really at work here, in my view, is the NCAA is trying to get this House case settlement approved, as are the plaintiffs. And once that's approved, they're going to take it to Congress and say, look, you told us to get our act together. We got it together. So make this law. And so that way we're not in court arguing over antitrust issues all the time. And a federal law essentially protecting college sports or exempting it from antitrust would certainly be something that the NCAA would like. My view is a little more simplistic. If you don't want to get sued over antitrust violations, stop violating antitrust law.
Right.
You'll stop getting sued. But they don't want to do that. The smartest thing for them to do, but they'll never do it, is for the NCAA to say, all right, pay your athletes whatever you want, just like you pay your coaches whatever you want, just like you pay your employees whatever you want, just like you pay your professors whatever you want, and compete in the marketplace. You're all market competitors against each other, and the rules we're going to promulgate are for the rules of play and rules of academic eligibility. The rest of it's up to you. And they're free of all this stuff, but somehow they don't want to do that. Maybe they don't trust themselves to act in a rational manner economically.
Jay Bilas is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. You explained that a lot better than I did. Although I think I did a better job before the break. I don't know. Maybe you've made me nervous, Jay. The thing about this whole thing that doesn't surprise me, because they don't want these athletes. They can say anything they want. They really don't want the players to have the money because they believe that this is my view. I believe they think it's their money, not the players' money. Is that they're binding the schools together. Like, the schools can't sue based on this document. Schools can't sue for whatever reason they want to sue. They're waiving their right to a lawsuit. But it wouldn't stop any player from hiring outside counsel and filing an antitrust lawsuit.
That's true, but the settlement is going to basically protect the NCAA and the member institutions for a number of years on that front. I don't know how many it's going to be. But because the players have to essentially opt out or opt in to the settlement, I think they'll be protected in that regard. That protection is not going to last forever, clearly. But what it'll do is give them an opportunity to try to come up with a better framework going forward. And it will stem the tide of a lot of litigation right now, because a lot of things that have happened, whether it's the transfer portal or NIL itself, have come not from the NCAA's forward thinking or planning. It came from them losing lawsuits and being forced into it.
Right.
And, look, that was predictable given their behavior over the years. And I think years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I would agree with you that the NCAA thought that's our money. That doesn't belong to the players. Now I think they realize that, look, the players deserve to be paid, but the question is how much. So what they're doing now is they're taking the amount of revenue sharing that's coming from this settlement, which is going to be, I think, 22% of essentially a Power 5 number. So say $100 million, maybe $22 million a school. There's an escalator in it year to year, and then they will review it based upon future revenue. But what they're also trying to do is say, look, when you add in the scholarship and you add in all the other things that are provided, that gets the players to essentially 50% of revenues, which is what NBA players get or what NFL players get. I hear them when they say that, but I don't really agree. First of all, I would say the scholarship is an amount that's paid from the athletic department to the school. The school's not out a nickel for that.
Right.
The only thing they're out is the opportunity cost of having a paying student in there. And if it were more profitable to have a paying student in there rather than an athlete, they would do that. It's way more profitable to have an athlete there. I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry. But what they're also doing is adding in travel costs, which I find to be absurd. Now, is that a 2%, 3%? I don't know what the percentage is. But I just find it laughable that they're trying to say, hey, look, we're flying around on private planes. What a great benefit, when the coaches and administrators are on those planes,
right,
including their families, and they're not taking a discount on what they're making. That's an expense incidental to a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. So I'm not particularly worried about that. But I get what they're trying to do. I just don't agree with it.
As somebody who is not necessarily versed in the business world and get all these things, my wife runs her own business. She does hair. She is way more willing to trade out her service for for some reciprocal thing. Like if she can find somebody to do work on our house, she is happy to pay them through free haircuts and coloring because the cost isn't identical, right? So I look at that. I look at the scholarship value, and by the way, I've always thought that scholarship value, even within the university, varies from student to student anyway, based on what they get out of that scholarship. That, to me, the cost of providing that scholarship isn't, let's just say, $100,000 a year. It's far less than that to the universities.
Yes, but there is a value to it, and
sure,
I don't have a problem with them assigning a value to it. It's just the idea that somehow, they act like they're paying some outside vendor for the player's
right,
education, and they're paying themselves. So they're really not out a nickel in this whole thing. It's just the athletic department on its balance sheet books an expense, and then they pay it to the school. So it would be like me saying, hey, the rent for my kid's room in my house, boy, that's really expensive. So I'm going to take money out of my right pocket and put it in my left. And look, my right pocket's empty now. I don't have any money. Or geez, look, I didn't make any money last year because I spent it all on cars, country clubs, and vacations. So I didn't make any money last year. It's absurd to say that. And that's sort of what they're trying to sell to people. It's just a question whether the public buys it. But the truth is, the public doesn't care how much players get paid. That's been proven. The ratings are up, not down. Interest is up, not down. They don't care if the players are paid. And so the things the NCAA has told us all these years, that without amateurism, college sports would cease to be and all that stuff, was total nonsense. My thing is look, if you think the scholarship is such a great deal, let it stand on its own in the marketplace. Because you give scholarships to non-athletes all the time, and you don't restrict what they can earn or accept in the marketplace. And now you're trying to say, because you get a scholarship, you get this great benefit, we feel like we can restrict your earnings on money that we are making off of you.
Right.
And in what industry does that work? I mean, it's almost like the NCAA doesn't want to admit that we're running a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry off college campuses, and we've been trying to call it education all these years. It's not. And it may be part of the college process and a nice thing and all that, but it's pro sports.
Yeah.
And it's okay to admit that. And that I just wish it would be a little bit more honest in that regard. You can get an education, play ball, and make money all at the same time. Those three things I mentioned, are not mutually exclusive to one another.
As in pro sports, as they became more and more popular and more profitable, in most cases, the economic rules changed with the times. They've all changed to varying degrees. Baseball doesn't have a salary cap, but there's revenue sharing, and there's a lot of other things, and we can debate the economic differences in pro sports. College is basically the only thing that really hasn't, and the only part of what you're saying that I disagree with is that I still think to their core they don't want the kids to get paid. I think they're just here. It's like we admit a mistake once you found us out. I'm always going to be cynical about that. But you referenced collective bargaining earlier, Jay, and they don't want it. But wouldn't collective bargaining help them the most of any possible thing that they could do, including getting Congress to give them an antitrust exemption?
Well, they wouldn't need it if they collectively bargain. So
right.
if you collectively bargain with the players, there are a couple things that would be difficult. One, it would be difficult because we have public and private institutions, and collective bargaining with some of these public institutions would be problematic in different states. So I get that. But if you there's something called a non-statutory labor exception. And if you collectively bargain, you'd be essentially taken out of antitrust scrutiny that way. So they wouldn't need Congress's help if they did that. What they really want is for Congress to come in and like I mentioned before, like sort of make this settlement law or something like it so that they feel like they can operate the way they always have without fear of getting sued again and losing. And all of this stems back to, in my judgment, 1984, when I was in college, when the NCAA used to tell schools how often they could be on television. They did. I mean, Walter Byers would say, okay, Michigan, you can be on national TV once for football. Excuse me. So Oklahoma and Georgia sued, and they won.
Yep.
And in the Supreme Court, it's called the Board of Regents case. And that's what led to college sports, the explosion in money, because now schools on their own, like Notre Dame did, could market their own media rights. And then conferences could bundle their rights together and market their rights together. And that's when coaching salaries went way up, revenues shot through the roof, and nobody complained. They only complained when the players wanted something. And we went all these years where we just shook our fist and said, amateurism, play for the love of the game, when nobody was coaching for the love of the game, nobody was an AD for the love of the game or the love of education. It was only the athlete that had to be in love. And look, I've been paid to play basketball, and I loved it more when I was paid. Love and money are not mutually exclusive, as I think everybody knows.
Jay Bilas, as we say goodbye, and I appreciate your time, because this is too serious a topic. We should be talking about basketball at some point. When you think about this particular issue, how long do you think we go before the whole thing blows up?
I don't think it's going to blow up. It's, multi-billion-dollar businesses don't fold up because they have to pay their employees. I think the difficulty has been the system doesn't like the rapid turnover, where players can just walk out after playing for 1 year at a place,
right?
Whether it's football, basketball, any other sport. I don't like it either. I would prefer that everybody stayed. It's great. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to say you're a student to be treated like any other student, and no other student is told that they can't transfer and participate in whatever they want at their new school. But once the players once this revenue sharing thing goes through, what's going to happen is the players are going to be signed to contracts. And in those contracts, they can be multi-year, they can be whatever the parties want. They could be 1 year, they can be multi-year, they can have options in them, but they'll have buyouts. And in those buyouts, so say you're making $1 million a year to go to North Carolina, and all of a sudden Duke is willing to pay your buyout and wants you. They'd have to pay your buyout to North Carolina, and that buyout would count against Duke's cap. And so you're not going to see players moving around once they're signed to contracts. It's just kind of normal business that the NCAA has not let happen. But once they allow that to happen, through the settlement, I think things will normalize. You'll see a lot fewer transfers and a lot more stability. The best thing they could do would be reduce the size of Division I to something reasonable, like 360 teams in Division I. They're not competitive with one another.
Right.
So if they reduced it like they do with football, pick a number, 160, then every good player in basketball would want to play on that level. So you'd have more talent spread out over fewer units. And there would be more depth, fewer places to transfer, and you could still invite whomever you want to the NCAA tournament from another division. So to me, that's the smart thing to do, but nobody wants to have the label of not being Division I. Mm-hmm. It would affect their fundraising. It would affect how they're viewed as an institution. It would affect their institutional advancement. So nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, and we have more schools making the jump to Division I every year, and very few going the other way, although St. Francis of Pennsylvania announced that they would be headed the other way. Jay Bilas from ESPN, at Jay Bilas on Twitter. Thank you very much, Jay. I appreciate your time. We'll talk again down the road.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.
You got it. Jay Bilas here on The Adam Gold Show.